Tonight we're going to introduce the book of Ecclesiastes and cover chapter 1. I'm going to make some statements to you. I want you to raise your hand if you agree with them. Man is no different from an animal because they both die. Enjoy what you have before you because you don't know what's happening tomorrow. Diversify your investments because you don't know which ones might lose or which one will pay off. Out of 1,000 men, I met one whom I could respect or who had wisdom. Out of 1,000 women, I didn't find any. All of these are statements from the book of Ecclesiastes. Not quoted verbatim, but basically the statements that the author is making. Now, as we begin to introduce the book of Ecclesiastes, we want to answer the question, of course, who wrote it? And if you were to read a reference work that was written before, say, 50 years ago, almost all of them would say Solomon wrote it. And, take one of the newer reference works or newer commentaries, and then very few would say Solomon wrote it. Particularly those who have come from a more liberal theological bent or liberal attitude toward the Scriptures. And when I say liberal, I mean that they don't take the Scriptures as being inerrant, authentic, and authoritative. But Solomon is the author. It's quite obvious as you look at the Scriptures within Ecclesiastes that he's the author. He calls himself the preacher. Now, the Hebrew word translated preacher here is only used in the book of Ecclesiastes, and it's used about 3 or 4 times. It's, if I can pronounce it right, it's the Hebrew word koholeth, and it basically means speaker or preacher. The book is called Ecclesiastes, comes from the Greek word ekklesia, which means church or assembly. And so the preacher is talking to the what? The assembly or the church. And he is the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Well, it's kind of hard just on that basis alone, and considering the fact it comes right after Proverbs, it's kind of hard to escape the conclusion that Solomon wrote it. But he says, I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. And then he says in verse 16, he says, I commune with my own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate and have gotten more wisdom than all they before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. Now, if you just read that, who would you identify? Well, Solomon, certainly. And so it's pretty obvious that Solomon is the author here. And he's on a quest. He's out there searching. Now, the old rabbis would tell you that Solomon wrote 3 books. He wrote them in this order. He wrote Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs, when he was a young man and deeply in love. He wrote Proverbs in his middle years, and he wrote Ecclesiastes in his old age. I think that's probably pretty accurate. But now that he's in his old age, he's reflecting on his life, in particular this quest that he went on. You know, Plato said that the unexamined life is not worth living. What do you think he meant by that, if you've even studied a little bit of philosophy? What did Plato mean when he said the unexamined life is not worth living? Right. This is, excuse me, it wasn't Plato, it was Socrates, quoted by Plato. But this is why the Grecians found him guilty, and he had to drink the hemlock because he was accused of being a gadfly. He would go to a blacksmith, and the blacksmith there, plink, 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 beating away. He'd go to a brickmaker. He'd say, "Why are you doing that?" And then he'd just keep asking and keep asking and keep, "Why are you doing it?" "Well, because of this." "Well, why that?" "Well, because of this." "Well, why that?" It's just driving people nuts. What he was trying to get people to do is, what are you doing with your life? Why are you here? What are you doing? What is your purpose in life? What is your meaning in life? And that's what Solomon wanted. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle all could have saved a whole lot of time if they'd have just gone to Ecclesiastes. Saved a whole lot of effort writing out their philosophy. What's the meaning of life? What should I do with my life? Verse 3, "What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun?" Now, if that disappears up there, y'all wave at me or something, let me know, because I can't see it. I figured if it was cloudy today, so maybe it's not as hot up there as it has been. Hopefully it'll work. "What profit hath a man as he taketh, as he labors under the sun?" What does he get for it? I spend my life driving nails, building houses, or laying bricks, or driving a truck or a taxi, or counting beans like an accountant, a CPA, whatever. I spend my life doing that. Well, what's the profit? What do I get out of it at the end of life? Verse 13, "I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom." So he's just not going after this hoi polloi. He's searching it out by wisdom. He's doing it methodically. He's doing it intelligently. "Concerning all things that are done under heaven," this sore travail. That's how he looks at life. "This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith." So he's on a quest. He's not just playing tiddlywinks. He's really serious about trying to find out the meaning of life. Chapter 2 and verse 3, as he elaborates on one of his pursuits, he says, "I sought in my heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom." So he wasn't going to be just a full-fledged drunk. He was going to hold on to his wisdom as much as he can, and to lay hold on folly. So he's going to go out there and be silly, do foolish things, but he's doing it almost as it's someone else doing it, and he's analyzing himself in wisdom, I guess, whenever he sobers up. But the purpose here is till I might see what was that good, or that good thing, that the sons of men should do under the heaven all the days of their life. And so he's setting out on this quest. What should I do with my life? Now, there's a scope. There are boundaries that he is setting upon his investigation. Ecclesiastes has been called life under the sun because over 30 times, mostly he uses this phrase under the sun, about 27, 29 times. And then sometimes he says upon earth or upon the earth. But over 30 times he uses that phrase. What should a man do upon the earth or under the sun all the days of his life? And so we have to approach Ecclesiastes from that viewpoint. Now, we read some of the things in here and we say, well, that's just not right. We know better. Well, we do know better. The point here is that Solomon didn't know better, and that's not what he was looking at. That's not what he was looking for. He was looking for meaning in life under the sun. That is, only in this life, upon the earth, without reference to anything or anyone else. So who does that exclude? God. He goes out searching for meaning in life apart from God. Now, what word do you think is used just about more than any other word in the book of Ecclesiastes? Vanity. That tells you something about life apart from God, right? When you're looking for meaning in life apart from God. But here again, we have to remember when we're reading some of these things and we read that and we go, oh, that's in the Bible? Yes. But you have to understand that Solomon is writing this from the viewpoint of living without God, living without any reference to God at all. Well, his conclusion then, as we said a moment ago, is his vanity. King James Version says repeatedly vexation of spirit, but a more accurate rendering of that, I think, is chasing after the wind. Chasing after the wind. And so life apart from God is vanity, it is futility, it is chasing after the wind. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. You say something, vanity of vanities. What does that mean? Well, the innermost chamber of the temple or the tabernacle was called what? Holy of Holies. So what does that mean? That's as holy as you get on this side of heaven, right? So when Solomon says vanity of vanities, what does that mean? There's no greater exercise in futility. There's no greater vanity. There's no greater uselessness or meaninglessness than to pursue life apart from God. Meaningless, right. And we're going to come back to that when we look at the theme. I gave my heart to know wisdom, to know madness and folly. So he was going to experience not only all of the feelings, but all of the intellectual experiences. Madness, foolishness, wisdom. All this is vexation of spirit or chasing after the wind. When I applied my heart to know wisdom, to see the business that is done upon the earth, for also there is that neither day nor night seeth sleep with his eyes, then I beheld all the work of God, that a man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. Because though a man labor to seek it out, yet he shall not find it. Yea, further, though a wise man think to know it, yet shall he not be able to find it. And so, life without God, life apart from God, is meaningless. That's the theme, that's the message of the book. That's what Solomon is trying to get us to know, to understand, to experience, without having to go through everything he went through. How sad it is to get down to the end of your life, look back on your life and say, well, that was a waste. He's saying you don't have to do that. That's why he's so insistent. When you get down to the latter part of chapter 11 and chapter 12, he says, young people, remember God. because you don't want to do what I did. Life is short enough. You don't want to waste your youth, in folly. As we divide up the book, it's pretty well evenly divided. Chapters 1 to 6, he just explores the vanity of life. And he just takes, one topic after another, after another, after another. And he'll explore this topic and say, what about this? Well, that's vanity. And here's why it's vanity. And then finally in chapter 7 to 12, and it's not a huge switch here, it's not a huge change, but he starts to move into the subject matter of, yes, we live in a life wherein many things are inexplicable. Much of life is vanity. But how can we live with wisdom in a world of vanity, when the rest of the world is pursuing vanity and meaninglessness and futility and trying to get us to go along with them, and we're tempted to do so? How do we live in this type of a world? So none of this is applicable to us today, right? Quite the contrary, right? Any questions on any of the introductory thoughts? Remember, the message of Ecclesiastes is this: life apart from God is meaningless. And so when he says things, he'll go through something and say, I did this and did that, and I saw this, and he said, vanity and vanity. What he's saying is life, if you look at life apart from God, that's pretty much it. It's vanity and chasing after the wind. But he's trying to get us to see that we don't have to live life under the sun. What we want to do is live life where? Above the sun, or in the sight of he who is above the sun, who created the sun. Now, he goes through some general things here in the first 11 verses about vanity. So let's take a moment to read it. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away and another generation comes. But the earth abides forever. The sun also rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it arose. The wind goes toward the south, turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. All things are full of labor. Men cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it may be said, see, this is new? It has already been in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of those things that are to come by those who will come after. I can just imagine Solomon, the aged man, sitting here as he's writing this down, and he is writing through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, but the Holy Spirit uses a man's mind and uses his heart. And he's thinking of all the great things that he's done in his life. All the proverbs that he's written, all the places that he has gone, all of the areas of science that he has investigated and explored, all of the people that he has sent out, he's commissioned to go out and find things out about the world, and all of those who have come to visit him, and the great projects of building that he's done. Now he's down here at the end of life, and you know what he's saying? When I'm gone, in the grand scheme of things, what have I really changed? So that's what he's saying here in these first 11 verses. He's saying basically that man makes no permanent changes in this world. He can affect his world to a degree, and certainly in the modern world we have done so with great works of architecture and machinery. But what happens if you just walk away from that and leave it? It'll decay as it is exposed to weather and the elements, and after a few hundred years, there won't be very much left. And so there's really no lasting, permanent change that man makes on the world. Look, the sun rises and it sets. What have you done today to prevent that from happening? All the rivers run into the sea, but the sea is not full. So he's saying, what's the point of this? It's like, I say to Nick, Nick, I want you to go in the kitchen to the faucet, and I want you to move the faucet over to one side of the sink and fill up a cup and pour it into the other side of the sink and fill it up. But you're not allowed to put the drain plug in. How long is he going to be there? About 2 seconds, because he's but if he, well, it's silliness, right? It's not going to fill up. And Solomon's looking at life that way. He says, here, I've been filling up this bucket, filling up this bucket, filling up this bucket, and there's a hole and there's no bottom in the bucket. Whatever I put in it just drains out just as fast as I put it in. The natural process is just the wind blows. Nothing you can do about that. And so, that should give us a little insight into all this hokum about climate change. Let me tell you, the effect that mankind has on the climate of this earth is nearly zero. It used to be global warming. You know why they don't call it global warming anymore? Because those polar ice caps are bigger than they've ever been in recent history. So it's just nonsense to think that man can have much of an effect on the global climate. Oh, yes, we can pollute things locally and make water bad to drink, but as far as the world is concerned, not much we can do. They had that oil spill out in the Gulf of Mexico. You know what happened to most of that oil? The salt water itself dissipated it. And so there's just not much that we can do to affect what goes on in our world. Think about the wars that we have fought. How few of them have actually brought about substantive changes. Well, there's the American War for Independence. That brought about a pretty lasting change, right? But it's not going to be forever. Think about just the most recent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. What kind of lasting change was brought about at the expense of all those young men and women? Zero. As a matter of fact, it's worse now in Iraq, I think, than before when Saddam Hussein was in charge. And so man thinks that he can just change the world. Well, we can change, and we can affect change in lives around us while we're living. But as far as having any permanent effect, lasting change on the world, there's not a whole lot that we can do. Then Solomon says, man is never satisfied. Notice what he says here. All things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Man cannot express it. What do you want out of life? Well, I'd like to have it. Well, maybe. You see life apart from God. You say, what do you want out of life? You just depends on the day, I guess. The eyes are full of seeing. But are we ever satisfied? We see something and say, I want that. And so we go out and we get that. How long does that last? Till the next model comes out, right? And we hear something and say, hey, that's new. But that doesn't last very long either. Look what the Athenians says. All the Athenians and strangers, that's foreigners that were there, they spent their time in nothing else at all. Now this is Athens, Greece. This is where all the smart people are. They spent their time in nothing else but to hear something new or to tell something new. But when Paul came and he shared with them a life-changing message about Jesus Christ, what did most of them say about that? I don't care about that. That's just silly. And so the ears are full of hearing, but to what end? To what purpose? And he says there's nothing new under the sun. And that, of course, we don't take this literally because there are inventions coming about every day. But generally speaking, when it comes to mankind, is there anything new? Especially when it comes to philosophy and religion. Nothing new under the sun. Even technology. Do you know that with all of our technology and all of our smarts today, most of the experts are pretty well baffled as to how the Egyptians built the pyramids? I could have told. I watch TV. The aliens did it, but they don't want to hear that. But, there's nothing new under the sun. The same old temptations that have afflicted mankind from the dawn of time still afflict us. You think, well, we overcome that now. No, we haven't. John talks about the lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, the pride of life. And those are the same temptations that we're faced with today. Think, well, we got to learn how to handle that, take care of that. We can solve that problem. Well, it's nothing new under the sun. All these new religions, new age movement, new philosophies, new morality. It's nothing but old paganism and old world philosophy dressed up in new clothes. And so fella comes along and says, I've got this new philosophy, I've got this new way of living. I'm telling you, it'll change your life. You'll just wake up every morning with energy and with a smile on your face, and you'll have good health, and you'll have a positive attitude all the time. And that's nothing. Usually it's something that's just been rehashed from 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, or even farther than that. So as he begins here, he illustrates how vain life is. I've made an error here on your outline. The heading there should be the vanity of pursuing wisdom, because that's his first pursuit. He's got a checklist here, and he says, all right, I'm going to find meaning in life. on my quest. And the first one to check off is wisdom. Of course, you'd expect this from Solomon, right? Let's look at verses 12 to 18. I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven, this grievous task God has given to the sons of man, by which they may be exercised. I have seen all the works that are done under heaven, and indeed all is vanity and grasping for the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight. What is lacking cannot be numbered. I commune with my heart, saying, look, I've attained greatness, and have gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge. And I set my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is grasping for the wind. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. And so as he goes on his quest, he goes to search out and say, I'm going to find meaning in life through education, through just learning and wisdom and just becoming smarter and smarter and smarter and having great insight. But what he says is, what is crooked cannot be made straight. What is straight, what is lacking cannot be numbered. That is, God has ordained certain things to be. And what he has ordained to be, it's going to be. It's not going to change. And so you think by thinking about it, by being smart, by being wise, you're going to change things. If I'm just smart, then I won't have to deal with temptation. If I'm just smart, I won't have to deal with sickness and sorrow. That's not so. The world is as it is, as God has ordained it. And what God has ordained to be is not going to change. And so you think, well, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to make people see what's right and what's wrong, and everybody's just going to believe it and everybody's going to follow it. Well, how's that going to work out for you? See, God has ordained that man has a free will. And so, the idea that the smart people can just rule the world and can hand down edicts and say, this is what you should eat and this is how you should live, and don't do this and don't do that, and people are just going to fall right in line. They're just going to do what they're told. How's that work? It doesn't. Man has a free will. So what's crooked cannot be made straight. What's lacking is not going to be numbered. That is what God has ordained. If something is lacking, then it's not going to be made complete. It's not going to be made whole. So he looks at this and he says, well, my smarts didn't do much there. My wisdom didn't help much there. In 3 and verse 14, he says, I know that whatsoever God doeth, it shall be forever. Nothing can be put to it, nor anything taken from it. And God doeth it that man should fear before him. Man sees how small he is and what little he can do. Well, what should be his response? Well, he should fear God then, because he sees how small he is. Consider the work of God, for who can make that straight which he hath made crooked? All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He doeth according to his will in the army of heaven. And among the inhabitants of the earth none can stay his hand, or say unto him, what doest thou? God, why are you doing this? Now this is not right. Don't you know better? Who can say that to God? Nobody. Well, I suppose anybody can say it, but who's going to say it where it has an effect? And God says, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. No. And so man needs to realize that his smarts, his wisdom, he's not going to illuminate the mind of God and fill in the mind of God what happens to be lacking in the mind of God. It's foolish to even contemplate such. Jesus says, which of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit to his stature? I want to be an NBA player. Have I grown any? What? He says, can you make one hair white or black? Yeah, we can do that today, but yeah. Can you make it come out white or black? You can do whatever you want to with it once it's out. You can't. What God hath ordained is going to be. Then he says here, basically the opposite of ignorance is bliss. He says, the more I learn, the more it vexed me. It's troubling, isn't it? He says, in much wisdom is much grief. And he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Why? Because the more you know, the more wisdom you have, real wisdom that you have, the more you learn about the way this world is, the more you realize how impotent you are. And then you look at somebody's life. You look at a young person. You've aged some now, and you have some wisdom from experience and from the Word of God, and you look at this young person, and they just have it all going on. And they're going to do this, and they're going to do that, and here's their plans, and it's going to be this, and this. But if you lived any length of time, you know that they've got disappointments coming in their life. And, maybe they're not dealing with reality. Or you look at a young couple here, and they're starting out in life, and they have no idea really what it means to be married, the nature of marriage, the permanence of marriage. And this thing, we can live on love. Yeah, maybe for a day. After that, you get hungry. And so you look at that, and if you have any amount of wisdom at all, you realize that it just vexes you. It just saddens you. And the more you learn about it, the sadder you can become if you don't adopt the right attitude. It doesn't have to be that way. But apart from God, yes, the more you learn, the more depressed you can become. Any questions on anything in chapter 1? What is the message of the book of Ecclesiastes? Life without God, meaningless. Life without God is meaningless or futile or chasing after the wind. Next on Solomon's list is a pursuit of pleasure and great accomplishments. And so he's going to try to, wisdom didn't work out so good for him. And so maybe I'll go the other way. Maybe I'll lay hold on folly, he says. I'll lay hold on folly. I'll try the opposite. And just live life basically hedonistically, pursuing every type of pleasure I can pursue. And to that end, then, the great accomplishments, the great works, the great things that would satisfy him and give him pleasure. We'll see how that goes for him next week. Thank you for coming.